Grieving is like getting shot with a shotgun. Stay tuned and I'll tell you what that means to me. Hi everybody, Wid fam out there. This is Leo with One Happy Widow, and today I'm going to talk about this thought that keeps recurring in my mind, that the feeling of grieving is like being shot with a shotgun. And I don't mean in a physical way, it's very metaphorical. I'm 4 years out of being widowed. So for those of you, if you're just now tuning in, I'm just basically sharing the things that I've gone through of being a widow. And so I've already been through, I passed the 4-year mark about 2 months ago. So now technically I'm just starting my 5th year of being a widow. So in that first year, it's acute. The grief is very acute. So first of all, let's talk about a shotgun. If you've ever shot a shotgun, I don't know a whole lot about guns, but I know just enough to know that I can kind of describe this. So if you've ever seen the shotgun shell, it's like a tube. It's like a canister of little tiny BBs or beads, little tiny bullets. And there's a bunch of them in there. Like you shake it up and you can hear them shaking in there. So when you shoot a shotgun, it goes out, all the beads, get shot out like this. And then the farther it goes, the more spread out the pattern of the little beads go. Okay, so it spreads out like this over, over the distance. So if you were to look at a target of someone who has shot something from a shotgun up close, it's going to be a bunch of little holes like real close together. And then of course, the farther you go out, you look at another target and you're going to see, the spread pattern, really big. And so obviously if you shoot somebody, or shoot an animal or shoot something, it's going to be a lot more deadly to shoot them with a shotgun up close. As long as you hit them in the right spot. You shoot them farther away, it's less likely for you to cause as much damage because everything's spread out. So I'm pretty sure you can already figure out how I'm thinking of being shot with a shotgun is similar to grieving, especially over time. So I'm using that metaphor to show that in the very beginning, it's like you get shot right up close. Okay, you're crying all the time, you're getting triggered all the time, your pain is acute. The thoughts of your grief and your loss and your spouse and everything that's going on is right up here, right up here. It is top of mind awareness. I've talked about that again in another video, but it's like you think about it, it's the first thing you think about. And everything else kind of falls under that. You get triggered easily. When you do get triggered, you cry a lot. You sit down and you take a lot of time to yourself and you think about everything. You're processing your grief. You're going through the stages. The first stage of grief is numbness and denial. And so, maybe the pain is not acute right then because you haven't processed the reality yet. As soon as you get to the part where it actually clicks in your mind that it's real and it's forever, that grief is all encompassing. And so as time goes on, the triggers become farther between. And when you do get triggered, the reaction to that is not quite as acute. Maybe you don't cry as hard. Maybe you don't cry as long. Maybe you don't sit and recluse yourself. Is that a word? Like, separate yourself from others as long. And then as more time goes by, maybe you don't hardly ever do it at all. It's still gonna always hit you. I mean, there's gonna be triggers forever, but those triggers just come, fewer and farther between, and they'll still kind of hit you out of nowhere. When you are triggered, you know exactly what it was that triggered you. Like one of the things that triggered me a lot right after Dewey died was that I was driving the same way to work every day. And every time I passed by the little school where our youngest daughter had been doing basketball, he only got to see her play basketball 1 season or 2 seasons. Anyway, he only got to see her play basketball, I think 1 season. And that's where she had all her practices and her games. And so every time I drove past that building, my mind would say, he's never gonna watch her play basketball again, ever. And it would just tear me up. And so that would just start all the other things. It would start a chain reaction of all the things he was never gonna be able to see for her. By the time I got to work, I was a blubbering mess. And I'd had to clean myself up, get myself back together, spend a few minutes in the car, and like suck it up and go to work and not look like I had been crying in the car all morning. And the sad thing is, no matter how much time went by, I felt like I kept, passing by that same building every day on the way to work. And it was just triggering me over and over again. So the point is that in the beginning, I knew exactly what those triggers were, and I knew where they came from. So if a song came on that reminded me of our wedding, or reminded me of a vacation that we went on, or reminded me of a joke that he had told, I knew exactly where the trigger came from and what thing it was triggering. Now it doesn't happen that same way. I still know that he's never going to see any of them graduate. He's never going to see any of them get married. He's never going to see any of his grandchildren. I know that. So when I have moments and I have days and I have periods of time where I feel really low, sometimes I think I don't even realize that it's grief anymore. I start thinking about what the hell is wrong with me? Why can't I get out of this funk? Why can't I get out of this haze that I'm in? What's the problem? Because I start when you start feeling bad, you start thinking, what is it that's bringing me down so that I can change it or fix it, and try to change my mindset so that I can, get myself out of this rut that I'm in. And so a lot of times I have a hard time putting together the fact that it's probably grief. I mean, there's other issues too, but it's probably a mixture of grief that I still, I haven't seen my husband in over 4 years. So, I miss that guy and I'm never going to see him again. I don't have that thought every single day. And even when I'm feeling sad, that's not the active thought. But I think that thought is still up there abstractly. And so it's kind of adding to all my other issues that I'm having. And so on top of that, I said this in another video, and a lot of people, kind of could relate to it, that, you still have problems. All of your problems and your issues are sprinkled with a little extra layer of crap, which is grief, which is your loss. And so I think now that's what's happening. And in a way, it's a little bit harder to manage it, because I can't really put my finger exactly on, well, I'm crying right now because this song came on and it made me think about our wedding, and it made me think about whatever. Like, I'm not crying over a direct trigger that leads to a direct thought that leads to a direct emotion. It's not like that anymore. It's not a linear, connection. It is like, it doesn't even seem to be in my mind anymore. Just kind of like, it's like that dark shadow that's just hanging around, and I can't pinpoint it to a specific thought or a specific memory or a specific emotion. It's more like it's mixed in. Let me see if I can think of a way to describe it. It's like if you ate something that you thought was going to taste good, and you think something about it doesn't taste right. Like there's some kind of flavor in there, or something that's in there that makes the whole dish taste bad, or taste weird, or taste like you don't like it. You can't really pinpoint the ingredient that's in there that's making it taste like crap. You can't pinpoint that there's too much curry, or there's too much pepper, or there's not enough garlic, or maybe something in the ingredients was bad or something. Now, you can't put your finger on what it is. All you know is it does not taste good. So again, when you go back to the shotgun, analogy, that at this point, my grief is hitting in I can't even get it in the screen. Here you go. My grief is hitting like an area like this. Okay, so here's a little piece of it here, and here's a little piece of it here, and here's a little piece of it here. Oh, and there's one right there. Is it over here where my heart is? And so it's so spread out, and each little piece in itself is not as damaging as the whole group of it that's hitting in one spot, but it's still affecting me, and it's still making me sad. And it kind of sets me back, because I think, okay, I'm 4 years out. I'm feeling pretty normal for the most part. I don't sit and just think about my loss all the time, every minute of every day. I don't, but it is still kind of hanging around in there. It is still in the back of my mind, and it is always there. It's just not in the front anymore. And so it's there enough to flavor all of my emotional meals with some ingredient that makes it taste like So it's really, at this point, I'm thinking, I never really went to therapy. And I'm thinking, if I went to therapy and they asked me why are you sad? Why are you upset? Why are you down? What is causing your heart to feel like it's sinking? What is causing you to not, to struggle to find joy in the day or something? I find it really hard to pinpoint what it is. Whereas if it was in the beginning, in the first few months or in the first year, and they said, well, what seems to be the problem? Well, my husband died. Well, that's all you got to say, because that pretty much covers it all. But 4 years out, if somebody said, well, what seems to be the problem? And I said, well, my husband died, they would, after 4 years, they're starting to think, okay, and your husband died, and so what? Not so what, like we don't care, but like, what else? Because if the fact that your husband died is causing you to just be sad this bad 4 years out, there's probably a problem. So it really isn't that. It's not that I can say, well, I'm sad because I miss my husband, or I'm sad because he died, or I'm sad because he's not here to be with our kids. It's sometimes I can't even identify it, but I think it's just there, just that bad flavor in my meal. And so I have started to not really recognize it, but I think I'm starting to give it credit, to give it its credit and say, you know what, I must still be grieving, just in a different way. I'm grieving this kind of grief instead of this kind of grief or this kind of grief. I'm grieving in a more general way that kind of covers all the other stuff in my life, instead of it taking over and grieving just that and not even worried about the rest of the things going on in my life. Because when you're in fresh grief, you don't care if the phone bill didn't get paid. You don't care if there's, a mouse that you need to catch in the back of the kitchen or that lives in the garage. Like, you don't care if, I'm trying to think of just little things, but like, you don't really sweat. You're not sweating the small stuff because you're too preoccupied about the fact that your spouse just died. But when you get back to the routine of life and real stuff, then you're worried about, the fact that the phone bill didn't get paid, or that your car needs to go into the shop and you don't have time to take it there, or, all the little things that stress us out, or your kids are acting up and you got to figure out how to manage that, all those things. But on top of all that, there's still grief, kind of weaved through. And so I think I'm finally coming out of my naive thinking that I'm having this problem with life, when really the problems of life are being mixed in with my grief. And I'm still grieving. Like, I'm still actively grieving, not every day, not acutely, but I'm doing the big shotgun target instead of the little shotgun target. And so at some point, it's still never going to go away, and I can still combat those feelings, and I can still, grief is still chasing me and I'm still outrunning it, right? But at least I need to give it some recognition, because I think giving it recognition is what's going to help me identify what the issue is, so that I can deal with it, so I can resolve those emotions. I can't make myself stop grieving. I can't make myself stop being sad, but I can recognize that that's what it is, and maybe add some acceptance, or maybe add some, what's the word I want to think of? Maybe give myself some grace, and say, it's okay. You're still going to be sad over your husband. So that's, it's okay to still cry about it sometimes. And, I hold myself to a pretty high standard most of the time. And so I have to kind of learn to forgive myself and say, you know what? It's okay if you mess up sometimes. It's okay if you drop the ball sometimes. Just keep trying. Keep loving your kids, keep loving your husband, keep taking care of yourself, keep going to work every day, keep doing your routines, keep being healthy, keep eating the right foods, keep moving your body, keep doing all those things that you're supposed to do, that you're supposed to do. Sometimes you're not going to do them all, and it's okay, as long as you don't stop doing them all completely and then get taken over by the grief again, because then the big target becomes this target again, and we don't want to move backwards. We want to move forwards. And so the only way that we can do that is just to still recognize that grief is there, so that we can face it head on, and then we can handle it we can figure it out and we can make some sense of it. So hopefully you can relate, to this feeling. If you're new in grief, this is something that you might find that will happen to you over time, and hopefully it will help you to know that you're not always going to feel like you just got hit in the chest with a shotgun from point blank range. That's early grief. Just know that it's not always going to feel that way. If you have been grieving for a while, you probably can relate to some of that. And so I'm curious to know, can you think of an analogy or a comparison to what grief has been like for you? So mine is like getting hit with a shotgun, right? Or having a bad tasting meal from an unknown ingredient. What is it to you? Like how can you describe your process and your journey of grief using some other analogy? I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with, because you're so creative and everybody's got their different ways of thinking of it. And maybe the way that you describe it will relate better to someone else who is watching. And maybe we'll just, make a list out of it and we'll see what everybody else comes up with. So come up with an analogy for how grief is for you over time and post it down below so that everyone else can read, and we can all share that idea. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss the next video. And until then, we will see you next week. Bye.